the surrender. That wasn't the victory hall of the Karathi hegemony stretched for miles beneath the crimson sky of their capital world. Thousands of species had gathered to witness what they believed would be the end of human defiance. The war had lasted 3 standard years, and now, finally, the stubborn primates from the third planet of Sol would bend the knee. High Chancellor Vextor stood at the center of the crystalline platform, his forearms spread wide in triumph. The Karathi were beautiful in their cruelty, with bodies that shimmered like liquid mercury and eyes that burned with the cold fire of dying stars. Around him, representatives from 100 conquered worlds watched in silence, some with satisfaction, others with pity for the humans who had fought so hard and lost so much. The great doors at the far end of the hall opened with a hiss. A single human walked through, and the crowd murmured in confusion. Where was the delegation? Where were the generals, the admirals, the leaders of Earth's defeated forces? Instead, there was only one man in a simple gray suit, carrying nothing but a small briefcase. Marcus Chen had the kind of face you forgot 5 minutes after meeting him. Average height, average build, with graying hair and tired eyes that had seen too much. He walked with neither pride nor shame, just a steady pace that carried him across the vast hall to stand before the High Chancellor. Vextor's mandibles clicked in amusement. The mighty Earth sends a single representative to surrender. How fitting for a species that never knew when to quit. The translator converted his clicks and whistles into flat English, broadcast throughout the hall. Marcus adjusted his tie and looked up at the towering alien. The Karathi stood 12 feet tall, and from this angle, Marcus had to crane his neck just to meet those burning eyes. He set down his briefcase and pulled out a handkerchief to wipe his glasses clean, taking his time while thousands watched in growing confusion. High Chancellor, Marcus said finally, his voice carrying surprisingly well in the vast space. Earth sends its regards and accepts your terms of surrender. The hall erupted in celebration. Tentacles waved, wings fluttered, and a dozen different species let out their versions of cheers. The hegemony had done it. They had brought humanity to heel, added another jewel to their crown of conquered worlds. Vextor raised his arms for silence. Tell me, human, do you understand what you have agreed to? Your species will be scattered across our mining worlds. Your culture will be erased. Your children will serve the hegemony for 1,000 generations. Marcus nodded slowly. We understand perfectly. In fact, we understood from the very beginning. That's why we prepared accordingly. The celebration quieted. Something in the human's tone didn't match the words. There was no defeat there, no despair. If anything, Marcus Chen sounded almost amused. Prepared? Vextor leaned forward, his massive frame casting a shadow over the human. Your fleets are destroyed. Your colonies are occupied. Your homeworld is surrounded by our dreadnoughts. What could you have possibly prepared? Marcus opened his briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It looked absurdly primitive among all the holographic displays and quantum processors that filled the hall. He unfolded it carefully and held it up. This is from our archives, Marcus said. A lesson we learned long ago. Back when we were still fighting each other with sticks and stones. We wrote it down so we'd never forget. He cleared his throat and read, Rule number 1. The enemy only thinks they've won when they stop looking for the knife. Vextor's translator struggled with the idiom. The Chancellor's forearms twitched in confusion. What knife? You were scanned. You carry no weapons. Marcus smiled for the first time. It was not a pleasant expression. High Chancellor, when humans face extinction, we don't bring weapons. We become them. He pressed his thumb to the paper and it began to glow. Not with any alien technology, but with simple bioluminescent ink that humans had developed in secret. The glow spread across the page, revealing hidden text, coordinates, and most importantly, a countdown timer that had just reached 0. The first sign something was wrong came from the hegemony fleet stationed above. Earth. Admiral Krath's voice crackled through the hall's communication system, panicked and confused. High Chancellor, the human ships, they're not destroyed. They're inside our vessels. Confusion turned to chaos as more reports flooded in. The human fleet hadn't been destroyed in those final battles. They had used an ancient Earth tactic, one so primitive that no advanced species would have considered it. They had let themselves be destroyed, breaking their ships apart into smaller pieces that looked like debris, pieces small enough to be collected as salvage by the efficient hegemony recycling vessels. Each piece of debris had contained hibernating human crews, waiting for this exact moment. They had spent weeks being processed, sorted, and distributed throughout the hegemony fleet. Metal that looked like scrap was actually carefully designed housing for soldiers who had learned to slow their heartbeats, lower their body temperature, and wait in spaces so small that no other species could have survived. Vextor's eyes blazed brighter as he reached for Marcus, but the human didn't flinch. The Chancellor's claws stopped inches from his throat as alarms began screaming throughout the victory hall. "You're wondering why your shields aren't working," Marcus said calmly. "Why your weapons won't respond. Why your life support systems are slowly failing. The answer is simple. We've been inside your ships for weeks, learning your systems, waiting for you to gather your entire fleet in one place to celebrate your victory." The human pulled another paper from his briefcase, this one covered in names. "These are the colony worlds you thought you destroyed. New Shanghai, Proxima Haven, the Neptune stations. Would you like to know a secret? We evacuated them months ago. The populations you thought you were destroying were holograms, automated responses, and empty cities putting on a show." Horror crept across Vextor's features as the implications sank in. "But the tactical data, the life signs. We're very good at pretending to die," Marcus continued. "We've had thousands of years of practice. Every war we've lost, every time we've been conquered, we learned. We learned that sometimes the best way to win is to let the enemy think they've already won." Reports continued flooding in. Hegemony dreadnoughts were venting atmosphere. Their navigation systems were being rewritten. Their weapons were turning on each other, and from the debris fields where human ships had supposedly been destroyed, new vessels were emerging, ships that had never existed on any manifest, built in secret manufactories hidden in asteroid fields and dead moons. But the true masterstroke was yet to come. Marcus pulled out a final document, this one written in multiple languages. Vextor recognized some of them. They were the native scripts of conquered worlds, species that had been under hegemony rule for centuries. "You made a mistake," Marcus said. "You let us talk to your slave species. You let us work alongside them in your mines and factories. Did you know that humans have a peculiar trait? We're very good at making friends with the oppressed." The Chancellor's communication array exploded with new signals. Rebellions were erupting across the hegemony. Not just small uprisings, but coordinated revolutions. Species that had been pacified generations ago were suddenly armed with human weapons, following human tactical plans, inspired by humanity's example of resistance. "We call it the Prometheus Protocol," Marcus explained. "We didn't just prepare for our own survival. We prepared for our victory. And victory meant not just saving Earth, but breaking the chains you put on every species you conquered." Vextor finally found his voice. "This is impossible. The calculations, the probabilities." "You calculated based on known variables," Marcus interrupted. "But humans have always been wild cards. We're the species that looked at space and decided to ride explosions to get there. We're the ones who split the atom before we had computers. We're chaos incarnate, and we've learned to weaponize our unpredictability." The victory hall shook as explosions rocked the capital, not from outside but from below. The human prisoners who had been brought to the planet as slaves over the past months were not prisoners at all. They were sappers, engineers, and demolition experts who had spent their captivity mapping every weakness in the hegemony's defenses. The price of underestimation. The crystalline platform beneath Vextor's feet cracked, spiderwebbing outward like frozen lightning. The High Chancellor's forearms flailed as he struggled to maintain balance while his empire crumbled around him. The other species in the hall had stopped celebrating. Some were running for exits that no longer responded to their commands. Others stood frozen, watching humanity's revenge unfold with a mixture of awe and terror. Marcus Chen remained perfectly, still in the eye of the storm. His gray suit unruffled, his expression calm. He pulled out a communication device, a simple human design that looked like a black stone, and spoke into it clearly. "Phoenix rising. All units confirm." The responses came quickly, voices from across the galaxy reporting in. Each confirmation was another nail in the hegemony's coffin. "Titan base secure. Mars station operational. Colony Fleet Alpha has emerged from dark space. Resistance cells activated on all occupied worlds." Vextor's personal guard rushed forward, weapons raised, but Marcus held up a hand. "I wouldn't do that. Look at your weapons closely. The guards hesitated, examining their plasma rifles. Each one had been serviced recently by human technicians, slaves who had proven so efficient and obedient. Now those same weapons bore tiny modifications, barely visible changes that would cause them to explode if fired. Every piece of technology you forced us to maintain, Marcus said. We improved. Every system we were made to repair, we understood. Every weakness we found, we remembered. Did you really think a species that went from horse-drawn carriages to moon landings in less than a century would simply accept servitude? The High Chancellor's breathing had become labored. The atmosphere in the hall was changing, becoming more oxygen-rich. Too rich for the Karathi's methane-based respiratory system, but perfect for humans. Even the air itself had been turned into a weapon. You want to know the real rule number? 1, Marcus asked, stepping closer to the gasping Chancellor. It's not about the knife, it's about patience. Humans are persistence predators. Our ancestors would chase prey for days, wearing them down step by step. We've simply applied that same principle to warfare. We let you chase us. We let you think you were winning, all while we were slowly, patiently, inexorably wearing you down. Through the great windows of the Victory Hall, fires were visible across the capital city. But they weren't random. They formed patterns, words written in flame across the urban landscape. In a dozen languages, they all said the same thing: freedom. The slave species that had built the hegemony's empire were reclaiming it. The Yantari, who had been conquered 500 years ago, were taking back their shipyards. The crystalline shard dancers were liberating their mineral worlds. Even the ancient void whales, thought extinct, were emerging from hidden refuges where humans had helped them hide. We found them all, Marcus explained. Every species you broke, every culture you destroyed, we found their survivors. We gave them hope, weapons, and most importantly, we gave them proof that the hegemony could bleed. A new figure entered the hall, and the assembled aliens gasped. It was Admiral Reyes, who had supposedly died when her flagship was destroyed above Europa. She wore full combat armor, scarred and battered but very much functional. Behind her marched a full company of human marines, each one bearing weapons that should not have existed. Sorry we're late, Ambassador, Reyes said with a crisp salute. The tunneling took longer than expected. Tunneling? Vextor wheezed. Oh yes, Marcus said. Did you know that humans have been digging tunnels since before we had written language? Every world you made us work on, we dug. Every moon, every asteroid, every space station. Tunnels too small for your species to use, too insignificant for your sensors to notice. We built an entire secondary infrastructure beneath your empire. The Marines spread out, but they didn't threaten anyone. Instead, they began helping the injured, offering oxygen masks to species struggling with the changing atmosphere, providing medical aid with the efficiency that spoke of long preparation. The message was clear. Humans were not here as conquerors, but as liberators. The Hegemony Council will never accept this, Vextor managed to say. They will send the entire fleet. What fleet? Admiral Reyes asked. The one currently floating powerless above Earth? The one that's being boarded by our allies as we speak? Or maybe you mean the reserve fleet that just discovered their navigation computers have been singing human opera for the last hour? Marcus pulled one final item from his briefcase. A small holographic projector. It sparked to life, showing a map of the galaxy. Red dots marked hegemony strongholds. But as they watched, those dots began turning blue. One by one, faster and faster, until the entire map was transformed. Every species you conquered remembered freedom, Marcus said. We simply reminded them what it felt like. We shared our history, our struggles, our victories against impossible odds. Do you know what humanity's greatest weapon has always been? It's not our technology or our stubbornness. It's our ability to inspire others to believe that tomorrow can be better than today. The High Chancellor collapsed to his knees, his forearms barely holding him upright. Around him, his empire dissolved like morning mist. Some of the assembled species began to cheer. Others wept. A few approached the humans cautiously, as if unable to believe this was real. A young Talarian, barely out of adolescence, stepped forward. Her species had been enslaved for so long that freedom was just a word in forbidden stories. She looked up at Marcus with eyes that held a mixture of fear and hope. "Is it true?" she whispered. "Are we really free?" Marcus knelt down to her level, his expression softening. "Freedom isn't something we can give you. It's something you take. We just reminded the galaxy that it was always an option." Admiral Reyes activated her communicator. "All stations, this is Reyes. Operation Lazarus is complete. Begin Phase 2. Phase 2? Vextor looked up in alarm. "Rebuilding," Marcus said simply. "You thought you were conquering us, but we were studying you. Learning how your empire worked, understanding its strengths and weaknesses. Now we're going to help build something better. Not a human empire, not a new hegemony, but a true alliance of free species." The human Marines began distributing devices to the various species present. Each one was a simple translator and communicator, but with a crucial difference. They were designed to work without hegemony control codes. For the first time in centuries, these species could talk to each other without their overlords listening. "This is impossible," Vextor repeated, but the words had lost their power. The impossible was happening all around him. "Humanity has a saying," Marcus said, standing up and straightening his tie. "Impossible is just another word for challenge. We've faced extinction before. We've survived ice ages, plagues, wars that nearly ended our world. Each time, we came back stronger. Each time we learned. And the most important thing we learned was this. The moment your enemy thinks they've won is the moment they're most vulnerable." The Victory Hall's main screen flickered to life, showing Earth. The planet that should have been surrounded by hegemony dreadnoughts was instead surrounded by something else entirely. Ships of every design, every species, all flying together. The slave races hadn't just been freed. They had been armed, trained, and united. "You unified them," Vextor said, understanding finally dawning. "You used us to bring them all together." Marcus nodded. "The hegemony did what humanity never could have done alone. You brought 100 species together, taught them to work together, gave them common cause. All we had to do was change the management." As the sun set over the Karathi capital, it was clear that the age of the hegemony was over. But Marcus Chen wasn't done. He had one more message to deliver, not to Vextor, but to the galaxy watching through hijacked communication channels. He faced the cameras that the hegemony had installed to broadcast their victory and spoke clearly. "To all species hearing this, Earth extends its hand in friendship. We offer not conquest but cooperation, not subjugation but partnership. The hegemony is broken, but from its ashes, we can build something greater. A galaxy where every species stands equal, where diversity is strength, where the only rule that matters is this: freedom is not negotiable." The broadcast ended with an image that would become legendary. A human child and a young Talarian playing together in the ruins of the Victory Hall, drawing pictures of stars and ships in the dust of a fallen empire. It was a promise of the future, a future where the children of 100 worlds could dream without chains. Vextor, broken and defeated, asked one final question. "Why show mercy? Why not destroy us as we would have destroyed you?" Marcus looked at the fallen chancellor with something that might have been pity. "Because that's the difference between us. You conquered to control. We fought to free. Destroying you would make us no better than you were. Instead, we're going to do something far more devastating to your ideology. We're going to forgive you, help you heal, and prove that cooperation is stronger than domination." As human medics approached to tend to Vextor's respiratory distress, the true scope of humanity's victory became clear. They hadn't just won a war. They had transformed a galaxy. They had turned enemies into allies, slaves into partners, and fear into hope.